to make sure that we have some good sharp tools to work with. So what I'm going to do is sharpen up my plane blade, and if you haven't ever done that before, I'm just going to demonstrate how very quickly. So first of all, you'll need a sharpening stone and a dish of water. I don't know if it differs for each sharpening stone, but mine I need to soak for about an hour before I use it. So yeah, I liberated a little dish, got some water in it, and I'm just going to sit that in there and let it soak and absorb some water before I get going. Alright, now that the stone's had time to soak, I'm just going to take it out and lay it down on an old dishcloth, also liberated, and then I have, this is like a slide, and I put my plane blade inside of it. Just come close so you can see. Right, so that's the slide. It has a little wheel on the bottom, and then that just slides on top of the stone. The epoxy's had time to cure now overnight, and it's nice and hard, so I'm going to go and remove all the masking tape. And I also need to remove the screws and then fill those screw holes before I can begin shaping the hull. Now I'm going to get started fairing the hull. And the first place is to do the outer stems. I'm going to start off with a hand plane, and I've got the blade set very shallow. Very shallow so that I don't take off too much material all at once, and also it'll help to avoid any tear out that might occur. So I hope you've sharpened your blade and you got everything. When fairing the boat, you're going to have to readjust your position. Obviously, the canoe is too big to reposition, so you're going to have to move instead. So work from side to side and get the best angle possible, trying not to tear out unnecessary amounts of wood. I want to point out that I've left the staples in down at the shear line while I'm shaping the stems, okay? And I might leave them in, depending on how the boat's sitting, I might leave them in while I use the planer, and maybe even while I do a lot of the sanding, okay? And then as I work down, I'll do the shear line near the end and tidy that area up and pull the staples out at that time. And the reason is because using the planer, I'm going to be moving the hull, putting a lot of pressure on, and of course I don't want to shake it too much until the epoxy and fiberglass is in place. Okay, now that we've shaped the stems of the canoe, we're going to fair the rest of the hull. Now what fairing is, if you're not clear, is we're going to take out the bumps and imperfections, as well as the thickened epoxy or whatever filler you may have used, and make the hull nice and smooth. The trick to doing this well is to not only use your sight, but also your touch, and feel along the hull for any bumps and imperfections that exist. And then with your planer set very fine, take minimal material off as you plane it off. Fairing fairing board isn't entirely necessary as a tool on its own, but if you have the materials, it is recommended. Got most of the fairing done, well, about half of it anyway. We're going to go and take out the staples along the shear line, right? That way we can work down and we don't have to worry about damaging any of our equipment. So all you need to use is a pair of pliers. I use needlenose pliers, and I keep a chisel handy in case some of the staples have gone a little deep. I can just, wiggle the tip of the chisel underneath and pry it up a little bit. That way I don't damage the cedar strips too deeply by trying to gouge them out with the pliers. Okay, well the next step is to start sanding with an orbital sander. The sanding discs come in a variety of different grits, and I would recommend starting with around a 60 or 80 grit. This is actually a 40 grit sandpaper. It might not be available around you, but this could even be considered overkill, but 40 grit is very coarse, and I go over the entire boat very quickly with 40 grit. Then I move up to 60, and then make sure that you have adequate ventilation and wear a dust mask while sanding. Now, because of the amount of dust that is put off into the air, regardless of the precautions that I can take, I'm not going to film the entire process of sanding. Simply, I don't want to damage my video equipment. Well, I got most of the sanding done, up to 80 grit. Now I've got a bucket with some lukewarm water and a sponge, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet down the hull. Okay, not too wet, but wet enough. And what that's going to do is it's going to raise up any fibers. Any glue that I've missed is going to stand out, and then also any scratches or imperfections are also going to stand out. Once that dries, I'll sand it again, and that'll get rid of anything that I don't want to show up. This is also the first time, now that we're wetting the canoe out, that we're actually going to be able to see some of the true color of the wood. Okay, now the hull's wet out, and there's nothing else you can do until it dries. So come back in a day. It should be good and dry, and give it another sanding with 80 to 120 grit sandpaper, and that'll do. Then clean up your shop and prepare for fiberglassing.